We were doing a hunting trip, and this is all self-guided, so I have friends that live in Idaho, and we're doing a trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon River, which is the river of no return, and we were coming into Impassable Canyon, which is about a 25-mile last stretch of the river that the only way through there is on a boat or out in a helicopter, and a guided trip.
Is that just because it's so steep?
It's incredibly steep. In fact, it's a deeper canyon than the Grand Canyon, which a lot of people don't recognize, but within the canyon, there's a number of very difficult rapids to manage. And at this time of year, late October, early November, it's more about low water than it is about real high water danger. But you can rip a boat up, you can get a boat wrapped on a rock. And a guide had taken 2 clients in there and got wrapped on a rock and ended up having to flip his boat to get it off the rock, and they lost most of their gear. And so we were coming through as 3, do-it-yourselfers, and saw this yard sale going on ahead of us, and so got pulled off and got their equipment out, got their boat put back together, and got them on their way. And so these 2 guys had come from out of state to do sheep hunting in the canyon.
Okay, yeah.
And so because of
that was some pretty nice gear floating down the creek if there are a couple of sheep hunters out there.
That was some really nice gear. Unfortunately, they ended up packing up and floating out, and that was the end of their trip because of the amount of material and equipment that they couldn't get back. So,
wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Man,
some wild adventures.
Yeah. So, I mean, this was this an archery elk hunt you were doing?
That was a rifle hunt. So we were out there.
Sounds like rifle season, late October.
Yeah. We had both mule deer tags and elk tags.
Fix his mic there, Nick. He's on a... There you go.
He was on.
Yeah, so you had both elk and mule deer tags. That's cool. So do you go to Idaho often?
Well, I had professionally had done a lot of work with Idaho Power and did a lot of work down in the Hells Canyon complex, which is on the Snake River, and through some acquaintances and folks I worked with, started doing some rafting out there, and have been down the Snake River through Hells Canyon a couple times. Self-guided my own boat through Hells Canyon.
Wow.
It was my first guided trip with my kids and my wife, which was exciting. But
How old were they?
They were probably 9 and 11, maybe at the time. Yeah, that was a wild trip. The river was actually up relative to seasonal averages, and again, I'm with my friends who are great river people, and we were a little bit debating on launch because we were going to be heading down a pretty wild stretch of the river, and there are 2 class 4 plus rapids. One's called Granite, and the other one's called Wild Sheep. And in the upper one, basically when you come over the edge, it was about a 28-foot drop, and you go down into what's called the green.
That's not a rapid.
That's a waterfall.
Yeah, you drop it down into what they call the green room, and when you're in there, all you see is green water around you, and it's kind of silent. It's a very, very strange feeling. And as you're coming up out of that hole.
So wait a minute, by dropping it, you mean you get out on shore, send the boat over, and then you recollect, or what?
No, we're in the boat.
Oh, you take that 28-foot drop?
Yeah, so we're in the boat
with your kids.
Yeah, it's
so crazy.
It's not vertical, but it's a hole. It's 28 feet, down to the bottom of the hole.
I see. So it's more like a water slide going down.
Yeah, but it's a very steep water slide.
No, it's a waterfall.
Yeah, that's crazy. 28 feet.
So Michelle's she's on her knees in the front of the boat, inflatable raft. The kids are hanging onto the lifeline on either side. She's got her arms around them with her hands around the lifeline. We drop into the hole.
There's got the life vest under each.
Single oar boat. And when you come out of the hole and you're climbing out of this deep hole, there's a breaking wave. And if that wave breaks when you're coming up, then your boat flips end over end.
Oh.
Which in a raft is not the way to flip a boat.
Yeah.
I mean, sideways is bad enough, but end over end is really problematic.
Yeah, I bet. Just folds it probably, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, it's just one big arching motion. And with 2 kids that age, we were feeling very blessed to be able to come through that. All the boats in our trip, I think there were 5 of us that went through, and everybody made it through. But when we got to the takeout 6 or 7 days later, they had a Forest Service person there that said that at least one boat in each party was flipping end over end in Granite. So
that's crazy.
That's insane.
That's crazy. You could get reported
Your
to
kid-
the DHS for that.
Did your kids like it?
Oh, kids loved it, you know.
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
I mean, you know, of course, they don't quite understand or didn't at that time.
Oh, Dad says it's okay.
Yeah, but, you know,
Meanwhile, Dad's back here debating if it's okay.
there was a pretty serious pucker factor. You know, through that trip. Believe me.
And they look back at you and you're like, it's still good.
It's all good.
It's all good.
It's all good.
That's crazy.
Oh, man.
So, I mean, how did you keep your stuff waterproof? And
Yeah, so it's quite an adventure. I mean, it's all in dry bags, it's all strapped, and you know, kind of the rule of thumb when you're rafting out there is always pack your boat as if you're going to flip.
Yeah.
And even if you know that you've got a mild day coming up and the rapids aren't as big as you might think, you got to be packed to flip every single day. And you know, that crew that, you know, just coincidentally, the crew that went into Impassable Canyon that got wrapped on the rock, that was a guided trip. So that guy had been down through that river a number of times, and we were in the last camp above Impassable Canyon, and we were, you know, getting geared up that morning, and we all had dry suits on. It's November, the water's cold. I mean, you got to if you go in the water, I mean, you got to be prepared. And the guy had hollered out at us. He's like, "Oh, you guys going to get wet today?" and kind of laughed as if, you know, like, you know, what are you kids doing? Yeah. And it ended up that we were the ones that helped them out, and you know.
So that same guide who was messing with
taunting you.
That same guy. He was a lot more humble when we pulled up alongside him, you know, after they'd flipped their boat. And,
Did you guys get a little wet today? Is that what you said?
you know, there's some karma out there, and so, you know, better to help than than to have karma come back and haunt you.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, it reminds me, of course, of like American Buffalo, right? Where Steve Rinella is talking about hunting the bison in Alaska, and he's like, probably, I don't know, but seems purposefully vague when he talks about like going onto the land on the other side of the river. But I didn't quite understand the climax where he was like he had like flipped a boat and his brother had come back to help get the meat or something, and they were trudging through the water.
So he had to float the bison out on that river, and his brother and a friend, they came to help him do that. But, you know, it was like after dark, if I remember correctly, and it was frigid water, and he had a hole in his dry suit. And so it was filling with that cold water, and he was hallucinating because he was hypothermic.
Oh, so his brother wasn't actually there?
No, his brother was there.
Oh, okay.
But like the three of them were working together to get that bison out.
Yeah, that
but yeah,
stuff
there might have been a
freaks me
problem with I think his raft did flip, and that's why he was in the water trying to guide all the meat to keep it from.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a couple of years
too strong
now,
of a current or something. Yeah,
yeah. But I mean,
that's crazy part of that
freaks
book,
me
though.
out. Yeah. I don't like water. I don't want to think about water. I can't stand the ocean. I don't like rivers I can't see the bottom of. It's like a deep-seated fear of mine. But speaking of fear and water, we originally, before we were going to jump into that story, we were going to start with this question. Ken and I always debate on how we're going to start podcasts.
I really want to ask Larry what water, if he's willing to take his kids off a 28-foot waterfall, what water are you scared of?
Yeah, so that's a good question. You know, I think as we study water in Iowa and across the agricultural Midwest, I think for most of us, you know, that do this scientifically, the concern about our water quality is really growing. And I think we are, you know, on the eve of a water quality crisis, you know, that's going to impact much of the entire agricultural Midwest.
Do you think we're already there and we're just not admitting it to ourselves, or do you think we're actually like it's going to become basically undrinkable and much worse?
I think we're headed in that direction, and certainly we are unwilling to admit it. And I think that's a really big challenge for our state. You know, if we want to take a longer view at this, and we try to think about where do we really want to be in 25 years, you can look back and say, where are we today? And is this where we wanted to be? Is this where we would have projected ourselves going 25 years ago? Yeah. And then if we continue this trajectory, is that really what we want this livable state to be? And I would say no. I think we've got to make some major changes to how we treat our land and water to be able to ensure that we have this balance between our agricultural, economic, water, natural, and human resources. And I'd mentioned this earlier, that if we put everything into our agricultural and economic resources, neglecting the water and natural resources, we will no longer have a human resource that wants to live in the state to do the things that we do. And that's a growing concern.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, that plays perfectly into Nicholas's original. So we've had 2 intro questions before the intro question, which is good. That's how you know you're having a good podcast.
So I'll say the question that was going. Originally, we were just going to start with Dr. Weber.
Yeah, Weber. Yep.
Weber. Because it's spelled Weber, like Weber, but
just like the grill.
Yeah, Weber Grill.
Weber Grills. Was that you?
Oh, great grandpappy Weber was messing around in the garage.
Yeah.
Not true.
Well, I was just going to jump in and be like, describe Iowa.
If that was true, that would have been Larry's sheep hunt that he was on.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
He'd been hanging out with Jimmy
Roasting
John.
sheep hunters.
I never know how to pronounce his last name, but I think he's the wealthiest hunter.
Yeah. He's been out in the Middle Fork on sheep hunts in that river.
I bet. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's my dream, is to be on that, be so wealthy I get to go sheep hunting on the Impossible River, Impossible Canyon.
Skipping over 28-foot waterfalls.
I'm having a great time.
Hang on, kids.
Kent doesn't know, but I took his kids to go.
Yeah, right, yeah.
All right. So, what do you think is the single biggest challenge facing Iowa's water quality right now?
The single biggest challenge is the acceptance that we have a problem and that we need to work on it together. I think that's the biggest challenge. And as the issue has become more and more of a concern, the divide between we need to improve it versus there's no problem has become deeper and more fractured, and there's more animosity. And I think, when we think about what's going on this summer, although we had, somewhat of a dry year last year and we've had some rains this year, this is by no means an abnormally strange year. And yet we've got the city of Des Moines with a water curtailment to 600,000 residents. Is that our new normal?
Yeah,
I don't really think that's where we want to go.
Yeah.
And as we continue the pace of intensification of industrialized agriculture, we're not keeping pace with the work that we're doing in conservation practices.
Yeah. What would be some? So we're abstractly talking about water quality is not good. What would be some adjectives you would use, or some conditions you would use to describe what's not good about Iowa's water? So different characteristics of it.
Well, yes. So different characteristics of what's not good. I mean, because again of the way in which we have tile drainage systems installed across our landscape, the commercial fertilizer applications, the manure applications that happen, we have a very leaky system. And within that leaky system, we have a lot of pass through of agricultural pollutants directly into our water. And so, the levels of nitrate concentration coming out of, drainage tile, 30 to 50 milligrams per liter, well above the, safe drinking water standard. Now, of course, nobody's suggesting that we should be drinking tile drainage water, but by the time that gets mixed in with the rest of the stream flow, we're seeing nitrate concentrations coming into our major source waters for drinking water systems, in the 15 to 20 milligrams per liter.
So what's the concern with elevated nitrate levels? I think everyone can understand it. Beaches closed, E. coli levels are too high. Well, E. coli, that's a bacteria you really don't want in the northern part of your digestive tract. Pretty common in the southern. But the
southern part.
Everyone just thought of the Zach D. Films reel on Pink Eye.
Speaking of which, that's why it's gross to take baths without showering first. I had a debate with a friend the other day.
Oh, yeah.
You got to shower before you bathe.
Yeah.
And you can bathe.
It's also what's gross about pools and everything else. Oh, there's just enough chlorine in there. It's dead poop. I don't know how it's supposed to make me feel.
How often do you go to public pools?
Not for a long time.
Yeah, that's all you need to know right there. So elevated nitrate levels, what what's the associated risk with elevated nitrate levels for human health?
Yeah. So again, I'm not a I'm not a healthcare professional, medical question, but certainly I think it's well understood that women of childbearing age, there are definitely negative impacts of elevated levels of nitrate.
I've never heard that before. That's interesting.
Absolutely. Young children, of course, the blue baby syndrome has been kind of well documented throughout the years.
That's interesting.
There is medical and scientific research that's suggesting that the nitrate EPA nitrate standard should be lowered to 5 or even perhaps 3 milligrams per liter.
And right now we say what's the
10.
Oh wow, so twice as much.
So we're well above that, and I think one of the biggest challenges when we have this source water issue, like is going on in Des Moines, they have a reverse osmosis system that takes the nitrate out of the water, takes it all the way to 0, but they can only process so much water at a time. So they take that water, they take it down to 0, and they reblend it with whatever's coming in from the river at 15 or 20 milligrams per liter until they meet the EPA standard, and they put it out into their distribution system at 9.5 to 9.9.
So they're just diluting it essentially with the cleaner water into the...
Correct.
Riley's favorite line: dilution is the solution to pollution. And he always says it. He always says that with great sarcasm. But that's interesting.
Yeah, if our trash is just spread across the land.
You interviewed
Ted Corrigan.
Ted Corrigan.
Yeah.
And what was the cost? Because that's extremely expensive.
It was like $12,000 a day or something that they were running
to run that.
It's like a
reverse osmosis.
Reverse osmosis system. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's insanely expensive.
Right. And
but they don't run it all the time. There was some machine they only run when
that was the one
that
right?
nitrates are hanging out from northern or northwestern Iowa down the Des Moines River.
Right. And so they have a couple intakes, and so they're drawing water from the Raccoon, they're drawing water from the Des Moines, and depending on what nitrate concentrations are, they can change how they're utilizing those two river systems. And then they do have some well water that they can supplement with, but they certainly don't have the capacity in well water to meet the needs of their service area.
Man, that is a real crisis. So, and then we've the kind of the new frontier, and want to be very clear here. There's no direct link yet between elevated nitrate levels and different cancers, but that's kind of the hypothesis, I guess, that is being looked at more carefully, right?
So there is a direct link between elevated levels of nitrate and some cancers. Now, where I think the discrepancy might be is the fact that the National Cancer Registry came out and said that Iowa has the second highest incidence of cancer in the nation. And I think trying to put that incidence of cancer directly associated with the water that we drink, that association has not been made.
That's the link that hasn't been made yet.
That's the link that has not been made. The other piece of that, Kent, is that we also need to think about the air that we breathe. And I think those two pieces are going to take a lot of scientific evidence and study to really unpack. What is the role of the water that we drink and the air that we breathe on the rate of cancer in Iowa? And that will take years and years of study because it's very difficult to determine what each of our exposure history was to different pollutants in our water. Yeah. And it's even harder to figure out what is our exposure history of the air that we breathe. And I often tell this story that, my wife and I own a 120-acre conservation property outside of Iowa City in Johnson County, and it's mostly woodland, mostly hardwoods, and there's some, regeneration of white oaks on that property. And when you see these white oak trees that are 5 years or younger, and the leaves are curled up so tight from its exposure to dicamba that it's killing the tree. Wow. And I look at that tree and I think, I'm standing next to a tree breathing the same air that tree respirates. And if that dicamba is killing that tree in the middle of 120 acres of timber, what's happening? What am I being exposed to? And it starts to raise some concerns, as our agricultural row crop system has become more and more reliant on insecticides and pesticides and herbicides. And, there seems to be a chemical solution to every bug or mite or fungus that we have.
Or inconvenience, basically.
Or inconvenience. And again, understanding that, again, this is an open conversation. for sure. Understanding that is something we don't understand.
Yeah.
But we need to study it, and we need to trust in science. We need to spend the money to understand what these causal relations are, because our life depends on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you're onto something there.
What do you think of the nutrient reduction strategy? That what has it been 10 years now or something like that? That it was put into place. Was it 2014? Do you
2014?
2014. Yeah. Okay, I'm like I did a whole docu podcast on this. I should remember. What are your thoughts on how it was drafted and how it's been implemented and or held to, or the results we've seen from it?
Yeah, and if I could, just to give a little bit of background information on that.
Please.
So, as the director of the IIHR program, our focus is on fluid mechanics, river hydraulics, watershed hydrology, environmental engineering, and science. And we have a world-class institution here in Iowa that many people don't know anything about. And principally because most of our work was done across the country and around the world. And in 2008, with the floods of eastern Iowa, that changed. We were asked to provide a program proposal to the Iowa legislature, and that led to the formation of the Iowa Flood Center. And so the Flood Center became very active in monitoring rivers and streams for flow, helping communities better prepare for the onset of floods. When the nutrient reduction strategy was first released in the late fall of 2012, I reached out to faculty at Iowa State University and said, gosh, here we have this flood center thing that's doing really good on water quantity. There's a lot that we're going to have to learn before we'll be able to fully address this water quality issue. Why don't we team up and do something on water quality? And so that conversation led to the formation of the Iowa Nutrient Research Center. I know you had Dr. Matt Helmers on here a while ago. John Lawrence led that center in its beginning, and Matt has taken over and done a nice job with that. Our role in the Iowa Nutrient Research Center was to monitor our rivers and streams for nitrate and other pollutants. And so we've built the largest real-time continuous water quality monitoring network in the country here in Iowa. And so, sometimes we hear people grousing around and they're upset that we don't monitor enough. Well, I can at least say we monitor more than any other state in the nation.
That's good.
And so that's really good. And so what I can say then in response to your question about how well is the nutrient reduction strategy doing, I'm going to do that based on science. I'm going to do that based on load information. And of the roughly 90 sensors that we have deployed across the state of Iowa, about, a fourth of them are monitoring the inlet and outlet of conservation practices, wetlands, saturated buffers, bioreactors, that type of thing. About a fourth of them have been deployed in targeted watersheds for water quality improvement. Like, hey, this is where we're working the hardest at, so maybe we should monitor those more densely to understand it. And then the remainder of them are, put around the state of Iowa, many of which are at the terminus streams or rivers as they flow out of the state, so we can calculate the load leaving the state. So back to the question, how is it doing? Well, we're simply not making progress. And as we look back on the inception of the Gulf Hypoxia Task Force and the nutrient reduction strategy that they suggested a 45% reduction across the agricultural Midwest, remember, the first goal was to have a 45% reduction by 2015.
Wow.
We didn't meet that goal.
We're 10 years over.
We didn't meet that goal. So then what they did is they kicked the can down the road. They said, well, we're going to move it out 20 years. We need more time. We're going to go with a 45% reduction by 2035, but we need an intermediate goal. So the intermediate goal then was a 20% reduction by 2025, the year that we live in today. And I was saying back in the teens that not only will we not achieve our 20% reduction by 2025, the state of Iowa will have doubled by then. Well, I didn't know it would happen as quickly as it did, but by 2018, 2019, the nutrient load leaving the state of Iowa was doubled.
Why?
Oh my goodness.
Why?
So it's only getting worse.
What? I don't feel like farming practices changed that much between 2015 and 2019. Why did it double? And I could be way off. Maybe it did change a ton, but.
Well, again, I would call this, it's the intensification of farming. And just again, a lot of anecdotes, but one example of this intensification, we led a program in Iowa we called the Iowa Watershed Approach Project, where in 8 different watersheds in Iowa, we built 800 different conservation practices. I'm proud of every single one of them. The largest concentration of those practices were deployed in the Middle Cedar River watershed because of the flooding that had impacted Cedar Rapids in 2008 in part, and because there was just a lot of opportunity and willing landowners. So we spent $8.5 million and we built 85 practices in the Middle Cedar to reduce flows and improve water quality. Over the 6-year period that we deployed those practices, in that same watershed, 1,200 miles of new agricultural drainage were installed.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, corn doesn't like wet feet. That's kind of a common saying. Yeah. And so we're putting pattern tile in our fields across the state. We've created an exceptionally leaky system. Mm-hmm. We have confined animal feeding operations across the state. They store livestock manure for 6 months. Farmers go out, they harvest the crop in the fall. They empty out all of their pits. That manure gets applied to the land. If it's a wet year, wet fall, then that water absorbs the nitrate within that manure and takes it into this leaky system and discharges it back to the river. Then again, in the spring, before the crop is planted, as you know, those same pits get emptied and that manure gets applied once again to the land in a very leaky spring system, and we see a lot of that nitrate coming out. The manure, I think in general, has not been seen as reliable as a nutrient to the crop, and so a farmer has to make a decision. How much are we going to supplement our fertilization with commercial fertilizer on top of the manure that's applied? And I think the general consensus, when you look at commercial sales of fertilizer across our state by county, you look at the livestock inventory across the state, there's an over-application.
Mm-hmm. If you could change one thing that would affect nitrates, you can change one thing, whether it's add cover crops to every acre or add buffer strips around rivers or change how much people are allowed to put on. Any of these things that we think of that are broad stroke, what would you change?
Well, I'll kind of put it together as a couple things. Cover crops have to be part of it. I think that's an important piece. Adequately accounting for the livestock-based manure in the commercial application of fertilizer and putting on what is a more calculated level rather than if 170 pounds is good, I'm going to put 190 pounds on because I want to make sure to protect myself against a wet year. Yeah. That sort of process has been going on far too long, and I think it's become so prevalent that within our system we are no longer supply limited. So you can think about transport limited in this case or supply limited. In this particular case, we have almost an infinite supply of excess nitrogen built up in our soil column that discharges back to the river when we've got tiles flowing and our rivers are flowing. Now, sometimes we hear the argument that the nitrate issue is just a weather issue. And every time it rains, it's because of the rainfall that this is happening. Well, we have scientific data. Again, we're going to be science-based, and we go back and we look at the turn of the century when it rained, the turn of the previous century, I should say, early 1900s, when we were farming Iowa, we were growing corn, and the nitrate concentrations in the rivers and streams in Iowa were less than 1 milligram per liter throughout the state. Wow. Then you go to the 1940s and 1950s, and that changed a little bit. We started applying more manure. We had a little more commercial fertilizer starts to come into the game. And, we elevate that to, roughly a 3 milligram per liter statewide average. Now we're approaching 7 to 8 milligrams per liter. Yeah. Okay. So across that spectrum, it's not that our soils have changed. I mean, there's, again, we hear oftentimes about the several tons of nitrate, that's mineralized in organic, mineral and organic material within the soil. And that's, overwhelms the few hundred pounds we're putting on as commercial fertilizer, but it's in a different form. Okay, the form of the commercial fertilizer and the livestock manure make it more readily absorbable by the water that then carries it to the tile, back to the stream, and off we go.
Yeah. Do you feel like people are starting to care and that the people who are of influence in these areas are starting to care, whether it's farmers or legislators or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, we're certainly with the water curtailment in Des Moines, the 600,000 people that are affected in that way. Quite frankly, it's a little bit of an inconvenience not to be able to water your lawn. I mean, that's not the biggest concern that I have. My bigger concern is what are those issues relevant to our public health? And again, we'll leave that to the public health experts.
Does that even make a difference, having people stop watering their lawn, other than water supply? Obviously, it makes a difference for that. But as far as increasing nutrient load, it seems like Keith Schilling, the state geologist, did a study on that where they compared that, if these golf courses and people would quit fertilizing, calling True Green to fertilize their yard and they compared that footprint to the agriculture footprint, and it was a drop in the bucket, comparatively speaking.
No, but that's not why they're not saying, hey, you can't water it because of the nitrate.
They're just water supply.
We can't clean enough for you to. Yeah, so you need to use it for your houses, not your lawns.
Right. So they're trying to reduce the demand so that throughput through the plant.
Right. That diluted water that they have to get out. I see. It's a supply question.
Yeah, it's a supply question. Yeah. And I think because it's impacting 600,000 people, or even if it's not impacting them, like they don't water their lawn anyway, so it doesn't impact them, they are at least more aware of the issue because now they're getting their curtailment notices. They know that within that service area, they can't water the lawn, and there is the one issue, and that is the nitrate levels are too high.
Their lawns would still be green if they had prairie on those lawns instead of lawn.
Yeah, the native
brown turf
native
grass.
Turf mix.
Yeah. So golf courses, that's a thing. Iowa has a lot of golf courses per capita and per acre. Do you feel like that actually matters?
Well, and again, it goes back, Keith Schilling did a really nice study in that regard. And the simple summary is the difference between a golf course and a cornfield is that the golf course superintendents, or quite coming up with the title of the people that manage the course, they have access to every square inch of that golf course every day of the summer. So they can put a little bit of fertilizer on, they mow the lawn or the grass. They put a little fertilizer on, they mow the grass. They put a little fertilizer on, they mow the grass. They can spread that out, and it's managed in a much different way. You put all the fertilizer, the livestock manure, that livestock manure that goes on in the fall, there's nothing to uptake that nitrogen throughout that whole winter season. And until, we get a crop that gets started, not only started, but then starts to need nitrogen, and then they've reapplied manure in the spring, and then they put commercial on top of that, and then they side dress it with anhydrous ammonia, and so everything is stacked up on that soil column going into that summer season. So there's no comparison between the way that nutrients are managed on roughly 24 to 25 million acres compared to whatever it is, a couple hundred golf courses.
Wow. So do you, so that you were saying that cover crop would absorb that. I'm curious, I guess, if they're dumping on nitrates and they're in very water soluble forms, which I guess is nitrate, what would the cover crops, so they're catching the nitrates even at that high of a concentration of being dumped on?
So, the cover crops are, doing a couple things. One, they're improving and increasing soil organic content. So number one, they're improving our soil health, which then ultimately leads to the need for less fertilizer. So that's good.
And the way we should probably cover it, because we always say stuff like that. They're growing, so they're unlocking nutrients from the soil, bringing them into plant tissue, but they're also pulling nitrogen out of the atmosphere, carbon out of the atmosphere, bringing it into plant tissue, dying, decomposing, and now it's available at growth level for an annual crop like corn.
Absolutely.
Or soybeans, right?
And again, I'm not a soil scientist. I feel sometimes like I know an awful lot about or I know very little about an awful lot. And one of the things that
I'm getting an education right now.
Yeah, I'm getting schooled.
One of the things that I think we have pretty good awareness of is that when we think about our soils in Iowa, the black gold, right, of the Midwest, it's our most important resource in many different ways. But what we're doing is we're overmining it, and we've done that for 100 years or so. And so through that overmining of our soil, we've reduced the soil organic content over a number of years. And going to a cover crop no-till rotation, I think the standard accepted number is that we can bring about, 0.1% of soil organic content back into the soil
every year,
each year.
Wow.
That we work on, a system like that.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
Over a 20-year period, we can bring 2% soil organic content back into our soils, which may have been depleted by several percent. And so that's really good, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing in part with the no-till cover crop rotation. The challenge, though, is that we just simply aren't doing it on enough acres. And
if we covered every acre in the Midwest that gets corn and beans with a cover crop, do you think that would fix our nitrate problem?
I don't think that it would fix it, but what it would do is it would start pointing us in the right direction.
Okay, so it wouldn't be 100%. Like, we would need to have other practices in place to fix.
Yes, and I think where things become very important, and that is that again, the farmers of Iowa are basically doing what our U.S. farm policy have dictated them to do. And they get incentivized to do certain practices, and we're not incentivizing enough of the good practices. And I think one of the challenges that we have in this nutrient issue is that we're incentivizing farmers in some cases to do certain practices. But on the back end of that, there's no environmental performance standard. So it's a little bit difficult to see, landowner be incentivized to build let's say a nutrient removal wetland, and yet over apply commercial fertilizer and livestock manure above that wetland. Okay, the wetland isn't going to be the cure-all. Okay, It does a good job in certain times, not always.
So what you're saying is incentivize them to build the wetland, but along with, to get your incentive, the water quality in that wetland needs to remain healthy.
Well,
so whatever it takes to keep it healthy.
That's right. So if we've spent $250,000 to build a wetland,
right,
but we're still allowing over application of commercial fertilizer and livestock manure, then that wetland isn't doing what it was really built to do.
Right. Yeah. Now it's an unhealthy swamp.
And not only that, but remember that wetland is only capturing the water that drains to that point. And so if you have a farm operation, say 1,000 acres, and you've got 100 acres draining into a wetland, what could be happening is that farmer got incentivized to build this wetland, providing some service on 100 acres, but on the other 900 acres, that same over application of manure and commercial fertilizer is happening, and there's nothing treating that. And although we all feel good about what was built there,
that's a great point.
It's just simply a drop in the bucket.
About 100 episodes ago, I've got so many questions on stuff, and I'm just going to go with the train we're on with wetlands. We argued about 100 episodes ago about what a wetland was, and we looked up the official USDA. That pond I showed you, is that a wetland?
Oh, I don't, again, I think I don't want to, I'm not the person to answer that question. I mean, in terms of the wetland delineation program and waters of the U.S. and all that kind of stuff, I think I would probably characterize that as not a wetland.
Okay.
Certainly a water holding body, but not a wetland.
Okay. Interesting. All right. I want to go back to drainage and rain. It rains a bunch in Iowa, and we kind of have this hypothesis here at Hoxie that we've totally taken a chunk out of the water cycle that and correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, we've never actually seen any scientific research that this has happened. But
it's this year we are not in a drought, nowhere near a drought. I love it. I think it's great. This is awesome. If we could get an inch of rain every year, that'd be great. But that has not been the case, not even close, for the last 4 or 5 years previous. And so maybe this year is just ruining my hypothesis, which I'm okay with. I'd be happy if my hypothesis got ruined. But starting in 2021, I think it was, there was that first round of ECAP payments that came. It might have actually been 2020. Yeah, I think it was 2020 when all this. What does ECAP stand for again? It's basically like a boost.
Money for farmers.
Yeah.
Or landowners.
Because of low crop prices. That was coming out of the trade war with China, and a lot of farmers lost a lot of money on that. And it's a nice political move, especially around election time.
To hand out money.
to do something like that. But also going along with that, with that was near all the challenges with COVID-19 and supply chains were interrupted for manufacturing equipment. A lot of farmers were buying land at that time, but also as you looked around, there was so much pattern tiling being done between 2021 and maybe I'd say 23, and you still see it to this day. There's a fair bit that goes on, but it was very aggressive at that time. And it just seemed interesting how we had some of the worst droughts, longest droughts that we've had in a very long time, while we were essentially draining Iowa. And so the hypothesis that Nicholas is referencing is, have we hit some kind of critical mass with how much draining that has been done in our soils, to where we've disrupted the local aspect of the water cycle, where we're supposed to hang on to some of our rain, in these wetland areas, fens, swamps, whatever, wet spots is what a lot of us call them. That water's supposed to sit there, and then it's available for evaporation locally and more precipitation locally. But with tiling things and increasing that drainage of the state so quickly, we're exporting that water almost as soon as it's landing on our surface. We're getting it in the low order streams into the high order streams very quickly and out the state. And so I just hypothesized maybe we've hit some kind of critical mass where we've disrupted that local evaporation precipitation cycle of our water.
Yeah, so I think great question, a series of questions, in fact, Kent, and I think we could spend probably the next hour kind of unpacking much of what you've talked about, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I'm almost feeling like I need to charge you guys tuition because we're
getting free education here.
Oh, crap, you caught us. This is like
could you just sign this at the end? It's like a diploma.
We're going to do watershed hydrology 101 here.
Yeah, that's right. So you're going to have to pay me more at the end of this because my credentials went up.
So really good. I mean, the water cycle is a really important piece of all of this, and I'm going to try to unpack a lot of what you've asked about. And so first off, what a lot of people don't understand and maybe don't think of from the start, but if you think about the evapotranspiration, so evaporation and transpiration, roughly 70% of the moisture that falls as rainfall in our state goes back into the atmosphere as evapotranspiration.
Okay.
So that's interesting, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
so the vast majority of it.
The largest majority, more than 2/3 of it goes back up in evapotranspiration. So that's one piece. So we're going to kind of park that.
Evapotranspiration is specifically from plants.
Yes.
Evaporated from plants.
It's evaporation, which is across the landscape, and then transpiration from the plants.
Oh, okay.
So when we put those two together, the evaporation that comes off your pond and off of other standing water, we're going to put those two together.
Yep.
And so we have surface evaporation and transpiration from the plants. Yep. So those two things together account for 2/3 of the water budget of the precipitation that lands in Iowa. So now we're going to deal with the other third, and that was the part that you're interested in. And so tile drainage changes that because it dries our soil. So that can change the kind of surface evaporation that we get because we dry the soils out faster, and so there's a little bit less of that. It makes the plants more productive, probably, so maybe we're getting a little more transpiration. So we might shift a little bit from evaporation to transpiration. So that's one piece of it. Generally, we think about our low flow conditions, our base flow coming up. So the lows not being quite as low because our tiles continue to drain our soils over a longer period of time. So our low flows tend to come up. We get a lot of transpiration, a lot of talk about, what's the impact of corn in Nebraska on the humidity in Iowa. So there's
corn sweat.
Corn sweat. So we got some of that going on. But when we think about the majority or the largest component of what our precipitation and rainfall are coming from, we're talking about moisture coming out of the Gulf. Okay, so warm, moist air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico into the Midwest that gets intersected by cold Arctic air in various frontal forms. And then we get this rainfall that happens, and that happens in very intense and sometimes very narrow-banded rainfall. That's called a mesoscale convective rainfall event. And so again,
vocab word of the day.
Nobody test me on this later.
But as you heard, about what happened in Texas, the absolute disaster in Texas, mesoscale convective rainfall was talked about in that narrow banded, very intense rainfall that impacted so many people along the Guadalupe River. That whole kind of system goes from the Gulf Coast all the way up into the Midwest. And if we go back over time, let's say the past 50 years, and we count the number of these events that have happened throughout our country, the bullseye, the most occurrence of that is in Iowa and in the northern, say, two or three counties in Missouri. Okay. We have the greatest occurrence. 2008, if you studied the rainfall patterns, narrow banded rainfall in the upper part of the Iowa, Cedar, Turkey, upper Iowa watersheds, that created little flood waves coming out of those first order streams. Second day of rainfall, narrowly banded on that flood wave hydrograph as it was moving down through the Iowa and Cedar River system. That was a 10-day series of storms with a couple dry days in there where we had exactly that occurrence that led to the devastation of 2008. Right. Last year, 2024, what happened up in northwest Iowa? Spencer,
incredible flooding,
Rock Valley, Rock Rapids. I mean, people whose lives were destroyed in those events. Same type of an event. So we have a little cluster of storms, and we can actually track the origin of these storms, and that cluster comes out of like northwest Nebraska and southern South Dakota into the northwest corner of Iowa. Then we've got this other kind of tier that comes out of Oklahoma and through Missouri up across the rest of the part of the state of Iowa. And so we're seeing that happening. Now, we want to project that forward. Climate scientists for the last couple decades, say 20 years, have been telling us that what we're going to see in the agricultural Midwest is the intensification of rainfall. And we're going to have more and more extended dry periods that get broken by more intense rainfall. And when they try to characterize that or quantify that, they do it by saying that the 5% rainiest days will get 10% larger by 2050, and the 5% rainiest days will get 20% larger by 2100. And so let's go through the thought exercise. A 5-inch rain in 24 hours
that'd be devastating.
That'd fall within our 5% rainiest days.
Yeah.
Wow. So by 2050, that'll become 5.5 inches. Wow. And by 2100, that's going to become 6 inches. Now, our soils in a normal condition can take about 2 inches of rain as infiltration in 24 hours. So the 5-inch rain produced 3 inches of runoff. The 5.5 produces 3.5. The 6-inch rain produces 4 inches of runoff. So the simple math is that 20% increase in rainfall resulted in a 33% increase in runoff.
Which has a certain percentage of erosion and pulling of nutrients in with that runoff.
Which adds to erosion and other things. But that's why when folks say, are floods becoming more serious? Well, our rainfall is intensifying. Our soils can only take so much, and that then results in greater runoff. And that runoff is
so that going back to Nicholas's question about the 2014 nutrient reduction plan.
Yeah,
that's probably in part explains why the numbers are getting worse, even if farming practices are more or less the same. If we have these more intense rain events, that would lead to more of that.
And I would say
runoff.
No. We're having more runoff, yes. But what we're doing at the same time of that 10-year period, we're increasing our nutrient load. We have, more livestock fertilizer. We have more commercial fertilizer going on. The tile,
so it's just purely that.
The tile drainage, again, the 1,200 miles.
That's true. Yeah, we talked about the more.
You're saying it's a decision we have made that that there's more nitrates in the Gulf of Mexico instead of weather. Right.
It is. And of course, the two things that you always want to separate on this nutrient issue is concentration is important to us. Load is important to the Gulf of Mexico. What happens here, we don't care necessarily about the pounds that are moving through the system. We care about the concentration because that affects our drinking water source. In Iowa, to put it into context, probably 3 out of the last 4 years or so, I'd have to go back and look at the exact data, but roughly about 3 out of the last 4 years, we've exported 1 billion with a B pounds of nitrogen from Iowa. And I was on a call. This is a couple years ago, and everything was by Zoom because it was the tail end of COVID yet, and it was a national or regional meeting, and I was on a panel and I was presenting, and someone else was presenting on the nutrient reduction strategy, and they talked about all the acres of cover crops and all the new wetlands and the bioreactors and saturated buffers, and they said that the reduction of load leaving Iowa was 1 million pounds. And some audience member said, 1 million pounds, like forever or just that year? And the speaker was very proud to say, no, 1 million pounds every year. And so then I reminded him, I said, look, in Iowa, that same year, we exported 1 billion pounds. So that's 1.001 billion.
That's crazy.
Only one of those two ones is significant.
So 0.1%.
Yes.
0.1, with all of our practices we've put in so far, we've reduced 0.1%.
And what we're not accounting for, it's like your checkbook, right? What we're not accounting for is the increased tile drainage, the increased commercial fertilizer, the increased livestock manure. So when we're saying that we're reducing things, we're not also then saying, look, this is what's happening on the other side of the ledger.
Oh, they're not actually tracking what's as much in the water. They're tracking the practices and then extrapolating how much they expect to be in the water from that.
Right. That's
crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy way to track data.
Like each of us here would be millionaires today if we only counted the income side of our checkbook and we didn't count the expenditures.
Goodness. Oh, what are we supposed to do? Okay, I've got a question about this. It ties a little bit. Taxpayers benefit from ecological and environmental practices because they get clean water. They get to help keep civilization afloat by having soil here, yada, yada. Farmers benefit because they get money. Farm Bureau benefits because they get money. John Deere benefits because they get money. So I would say farmers and the pickaxe sellers, they're all kind of in a camp where they benefit from ecological or from what would you say?
Incentives?
Incentives, yeah, from the incentives. So who should pay for these? Should it be the taxpayer or should it be the farmer?
Pay for
the environmental practices like prairie buffer strips or, set aside acres or, you know what I mean? Because I actually don't think, I might get killed for this one. I mean that as exaggeration, but hyperbole. I might get in trouble for this one. I don't think that farmers on macro level would lose that much money if we took out 10% of the production, because the Chicago Exchange would say, oh, we don't have as much as we needed. The price needs to go up. You know what I mean? So they'd end up getting the same amount of money would be put into the agricultural. I mean, you can't do that for 25%. You couldn't rip out.
You're decreasing supply, therefore increasing demand.
Exactly. And I think that the market would respond in a way that mitigates a 5 to 10% decrease in. Like, I think we could healthily decrease 5 to 10% of our production. Anyway, you seem like you had a point there.
Yeah, I do. How are commodity prices today?
Bad.
They're not good this
year. Not very good, right? And that ebbs and flows, right? So that changes over time. But again, another example of how we could be doing better is in 2019. So think about the Missouri River for a little bit. 2011, the Missouri River was above flood stage for 100 days. And that all happened. We had a major...
That's right, yeah. I forgot all this flooding that spring was crazy.
Right. We had a very wet spring, a very kind of late spring, late winter, up in Montana, filled the federal reservoirs. Once those reservoirs are full, it takes a long time to drain them out. And then in 2019, 8 years later, very different system, right? We had a lot of snowpack, snow water equivalency around the Midwest. The depth of water on their frozen soils was about 6.5 inches. And we had a relatively small rainfall event that came through Nebraska, put 3.5 inches of rain on 6.5 inches of frozen water.
That's right. Nebraska really flooded that
and
year.
Produced 100% runoff. So we had a rainfall event that was the equivalent of 10 inches of rain with 100% runoff. And we had 53 breaches in the Missouri River levee along the Iowa border, the Platte River, the nearby. I mean, it was a mess, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
And so when you look at what had happened out there, what a disaster. Following that, event that year, and we had flooding across the nation that year, USDA came out with monies for their emergency wetland program. Iowa got $36 million. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
$36 million at $10,000 an acre takes 3,600 acres out of production. Okay. In that same year, in the open enrollment period, 30,000 acres came voluntarily into an FSA office and said, pick me. If we would have had $300 million, we could have taken 30,000 acres out of production. Crazy. And when you think about that a little bit, again, kind of bear with me on the thought exercise, 30,000 acres on 24 million acres, like 1%.
Yeah, it's not a huge deal.
What's that do with supply? It's not a huge deal. These are farmers that wanted to help, that needed some federal assistance and deserved federal assistance, but we didn't have the funding to do it. Mm-hmm. We farm 400,000 acres in Iowa that is in the 2-year floodplain. 400,000 acres. Now, in some years, that could be some of the best ground that we got, right? Yeah. But in a lot of other years, when somebody comes to me and says, gosh, Larry, why does it flood more than once in every 100 years in the 100-year floodplain? Well, you can probably say the same thing for the 50-year floodplain and the 25-year and the 10-year and the 5-year and the 2-year.
Right.
So if we wanted to start to address things, we could take 400,000 acres out of the 2-year floodplain. And then the second part of the question is, what do you think the impact of that ground is on our water quality?
Yeah.
Well, it is the most connected to our streams.
Immediately.
Man.
Right there,
Immediately. Tiled or not tiled, okay, we have a base flow coming through our soil column, oftentimes sandy soils that are moving, that material back to our streams very quickly.
So kind of going back to Nicholas's question now, because I love that idea. How do we fund that? I mean, we could just through increase taxes. That would probably have to come. I mean, it affects our water quality affects everyone downstream from us in the Gulf of whatever it's called now,
Mexico.
That gets. We have a huge dead zone there because of the activity upstream. But I got to think that someone in Vermont has them paying federal income tax to support 400,000 acres of Iowa cropland that shouldn't be farmed anyways, to pay someone to do the right thing. That's a bitter pill, especially when you look at all the chatter that's going on about our deficit, and they're looking at selling off federal land to try and, as if that would ever help, to sell or to pay off our deficit. It just seems that increasing expense on a federal level. Now, Iowa financially is doing better than our federal government is. But even still, that's a lot of acres for Iowans that'd be a big tax increase there. How do you think we could come up with money to support, or is it just simply farmers? If you own that land, I mean, whatever we got for CRP, whatever we got for other existing programs, WRP, that we can, maybe even like Kevin Grigson's Iowa wetlands mitigation. What's that called again? Wetland mitigation.
EOR.
Well, that's his company.
Oh, the Iowa Wetland Mitigation
Bank. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, we got programs like that, but I mean we only got funds to cover that. I mean, how do we make that happen, do you think? Or is it just purely it's a stick instead of a carrot? Quit farming that stuff that's immediately polluting our waters.
Yeah. So again, great question. I'm certainly no expert in national finance and our federal budget and federal deficits, and those are arguments and conversations for others to have. But I think one way to sort of put it into context, and you mentioned this a bit earlier, Kent, was that because of trade imbalance and tariffs and other things in the previous Trump administration, there were some economic programs for farmers, and across the country they came out in two different tranches, $12 billion and $16 billion. direct support for agriculture. And when you think about $28 billion with absolutely zero strings attached to it, and you think about the good that
These are the two ECAP things that we're talking about here? Okay.
Yeah. Think about the good that could have been done with $28 billion if we put that into conservation programs.
Yeah. Yeah, basically say, here's your ECAP funds.
Right.
These are what you can spend it on.
Here's your ECAP funds, and spend 10% of it on conservation.
Yeah.
Right. Spend 20% of it on conservation.
That's a great point. I like that. That's a good solution.
Yeah.
I was thinking this, and now it might be a bad analogy, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But let's say, Ken, you live in Des Moines. Let's say you're kind of a mad scientist in your garage. You find a new way to power a nuclear power plant. And if people get radiation from it, instead of everybody dying like they would like 50 years ago, it's more like one in every 10,000 people that come in contact with it. They tend to get cancer and they die. And it's fine when it's all contained, but you're practicing with it in your garage and there's no regulation on what's leaking out of your garage. Who's responsible for that? Your neighbors to pay you to put up new walls to keep that radiation in? Probably not.
Right.
Probably you.
Well, and again, I think our system, this global economic and agricultural system that we've created, right? We've created this through policy. Policy is driving where we are today. And when you think about, we're growing corn to feed into an ethanol system, that has a net energy, of somewhere around 1.0, whether it's 1.001 or 0.999. It's just, it's barely making that part work. It's an economic program for the state of Iowa.
And that's because not just what ethanol can produce energy-wise, but also the energy that goes into making the ethanol system work.
That's right. So it's basically a wash. And again, it can be a little better than a wash or a little less than a wash, but it's basically a wash. And so that's an economic driver for the state of Iowa. No question about that. But that's a policy decision. Then we have a heavily subsidized, crop insurance program, which used to be about yield and now is about
expected.
It's an economic insurance policy rather than a yield policy because it's based on a basis and a unit price on corn and so on and so forth. So that's an issue.
Oh, yeah.
And then we say, again, we want to try to reduce nutrients, so we're going to go out and put cover crops on. But then how do we terminate those cover crops? Yeah, so if we had 26 million acres of cover crops out there and we've got to use glyphosate to terminate it, I don't think that's a future that we want.
Right.
Why do you think we're in this system? Like one foot in front of the other. What were some of the big steps that got us to where we're at?
Well, again, I think it goes all the way back, and I know it's been talked about in the podcast before. It goes back to my time on the farm as a child and my dad, making a living and raising a family on 128 acres. And Earl Butts, as Secretary of Agriculture, came out and said, "Get bigger, get out." And that was a decision.
What was his thought process there, though?
Well, again,
he's opening up global trade more,
global markets.
So you're growing corn not just for Iowans, not even.
So
just
he was
for
saying,
Americans.
Get efficient so we can compete on the global market.
Right. And it kind of pushed everyone into the same lanes in order to do so.
Right, and we have 25 million hogs under roof at any given time. 6-month life, that's 50 million a year.
Yeah,
3 million people. I don't think my wife and we love pork. I don't think we eat a whole hog every year.
Right, yeah.
So obviously that's a big export. That's an important economy for Iowa. But when we're selling it to underdeveloped or developing countries at less than the full cost of production, when we add in the environmental cost, then it's kind of interesting, right? This wonderful developed country that we live in, providing pork at a cost less than the full cost of production to a developing country. Okay, that's interesting, right? That's a concern.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. This is interesting. Okay, well, I only have one.
Well, one of the things I want to, while we're talking about the changes with ethanol production, that's a marked thing from a habitat standpoint in Iowa. I can't remember the exact dates that they give. I've referenced it before, but I believe it's at the beginning of the upland roadside surveys that they do every summer and release the results around the 1st of September or late August, early September. Our friend Todd Bogenschutz oversees that. And I think it's at the beginning of that survey, he always mentions how much habitat has been lost in Iowa since, I can't remember the day. I want to say it's like 1995 or something. And the last time that I remember looking at that specific part of the roadside survey was maybe back in 2020. And, now I just go straight to show me the tables. How's our wildlife doing? But I think it was 2020. And it was, I believe, a 10-mile wide band that stretched from Davenport to Council Bluffs of habitat had been lost in that time. And a big part of that was ethanol mandates that came down from the federal level. And so there's a marked, difference in pheasant population and quail populations, and just in the habitat that you see while you're out traveling across the landscape. Has there been a noted difference in water quality pre-ethanol, post-ethanol?
Yeah, so I also, because we like to speak in scientific terms, not having that data in front of me, that's absolutely something that could be looked at. I don't really have that in hand. Mm-hmm. The comment that I made earlier where we sort of group things into early 1900s, kind of 1950s, present day, those were just kind of big markers. Ethanol and the inception of ethanol in there certainly based on process and everything else, would move it towards higher nitrate loads because we're farming the land more intensely.
Right.
But again, I'd have to go back and pull that data.
Sure. Yep.
Man. Well, before we got started, you mentioned something about we have a world-class program at University of Iowa, and it's used in the world. Kent, you weren't here. You were saying that you guys helped set up London's, was it sewer system?
Yeah.
Drainage system.
So beginning in roughly 1920, the Iowa Institute of Hydraulic Research was formed. And so 105 years ago, this program existed. About 25 years ago, we renamed the program to IIHR, the acronym, Hydroscience and Engineering. And we, study everything from fundamental fluid mechanics to river mechanics or hydraulics, watershed hydrology, so H&H, environmental engineering, and science. And as some examples, we did all the hydraulic design for the Thames Tideway Tunnel, which is the stormwater system for the City of London. We designed the stormwater system in Abu Dhabi. We have active projects in South America right now looking at dissolved gas mitigation at large hydropower dams.
Interesting.
We have been under continuous funding from the Office of Naval Research since World War II, helping the Navy better design their surface combatants and submarines. We also create both laboratory experiments and have the most sophisticated wave basin for naval hydrodynamics in the world at the University of Iowa. But we also do computational research, and we've created our own mathematical models for simulating flows around ships called computational fluid dynamics, or CFD Ship Iowa. And so that serves the Navy. We've had a number of world's first experimentally and numerically that have been created here at the university. Then, again, we created the Iowa Flood Center, nation's only academic center focused on flooding, helped to co-found the Iowa Nutrient Research Center in partnership with Iowa State, moved the Geological Survey from the Iowa DNR to the University of Iowa. They study, of course, the rocks and minerals and subsurface strata of the state, but they also look at groundwater as a resource. Again, Keith Schilling, whose name was mentioned earlier, is a state geologist. So we're a program of about 30 faculty, about 70 full-time staff, and typically 100 graduate students studying master's and PhD. So we're 200 people, and nominally about $20 million a year operation. $2 million comes from the state to support the Flood Center and the Geological Survey. And then about $12 million would come from federal grants and $6 million in contract work, like the City of London. Right now we're developing a stormwater system for Newtown Creek, just outside of New York City. We did a stormwater system for Ellicott City, where they had 2,000-year floods in a 3-year period with loss of life. We just designed a $250 million fish bypass system for agricultural water diversion on the Santa Clara River just north of LA, servicing about 15,000 acres of high-value cash crops in the Oxnard Plain. And so we work on this sort of industry commercial side. Our challenge right now is, with 100 graduate students, we would normally be inviting 25 to 30 new graduate students coming to Iowa from all around the world to study these things.
Wow.
Each fall. This fall, we'll have 2 new students.
Why?
Because students internationally do not want to come to the United States. And 2, because of cuts in federal funding, in order for us to protect the jobs of our full-time staff, we have chosen to keep those people on payroll rather than sacrifice, their jobs.
Sure. And why so federal's giving you $12 million, which probably doesn't feel like enough, but it feels like it should be a shining jewel for Iowa, and they should put a little more money into it. That's easy for me to say from the peanut gallery, but I don't know what is going on there.
Well, it's a challenge, and because before 2008 we got 0 from the state of Iowa. Okay, we were all grant and contract funded and federally funded. The Flood Center moving the Geological Survey to the university, ended up with that $2 million. The Geological Survey came in 2014. That's when we made that transition. And from 2014 until last year, they had a budget of $695,000. When you compare the next nearest 14 states to Iowa, the average Geological Survey, there's one in every state, is funded at $4 million.
Wow.
And so this last year, on the hard work of Keith and myself in advocating for our programs, we were able to get a $200,000 increase in that budget. The Iowa Flood Center began in 2009 with a $1.3 million state appropriation. Governor Branstad came back to the governor's office. He raised us to $1.5 million. And then in 2017, when the Iowa legislature flipped to a full Republican control, House and Senate, they zeroed us out in 2017. And we had hundreds, if not thousands, of points of contact on the legislature the morning that news was released. And the legislature restored us at $1.2 million. And we've been flat ever since then.
Wow. And
the reason they zeroed us out, the language was used that they didn't like the fact that the Iowa Flood Center was studying water quality in Iowa and we should stick to floods. Well, the reality is that the work that we were doing in water quality was monies that came through the Iowa Nutrient Research Center to fund our work, not Flood Center money. So the Flood Center focused on floods. The Nutrient Center did nutrients. The Geological Survey does geology. But it was all under this IIHR umbrella.
The budget wasn't the reason they didn't like it, that you were studying water quality.
All right. So now flash forward a couple of years. And 2 years ago, the legislature decided to cut the budget of the Iowa Nutrient Research Center by $500,000. So from roughly $1.5 million a year to $1 million. That was administered across all the Iowa Nutrient Research Center programs. And then the following year, it became more evident that the intent was not to have that be a universal cut, but to simply cut our program. And so beginning last year, we no longer get funding from the state of Iowa to run the nation's largest and most important water quality monitoring network.
So where do you go to get that funding?
So thankfully, we approached the Walton Family Foundation, and they saw the importance of keeping it running. And
we talked about that in a coffee time. The guy from Pheasant Fest told us about that.
Walton Family Foundation, yeah.
So they provided a 2-year grant to us to keep it running for 2 years, but they made it clear and said that this is only bridge funding. And we expect you, Larry, to go out and find either corporate funding, foundation funding, state or federal funding. And, and when you do that, or when I'm doing that, you go to private foundations and you think about the needs that they get, or in requests that they get today, to help people, right? To help all across all the spectrum of the needs that people in society have. They're not really interested in like funding stop signs on our roadways.
Yeah.
So they're not really interested in funding, the water quality monitoring systems. It's really a state or federal responsibility. Last fall, in September, I invited the acting assistant administrator of the Office of Water from EPA, Bruno Piggott, to Iowa. He spent a day in Des Moines at Des Moines Waterworks. He spent that afternoon on a farmer around the Des Moines area looking at conservation practices. And then he spent the second day with us learning more about the work that we do. in eastern Iowa or across Iowa and water quality, he had a real interest in funding our program. His position was a politically appointed position under the Biden administration, and I think the general consensus is that currently at the EPA they don't have an interest in funding a water quality monitoring network in Iowa. So next year, in probably late July, we'll pull all our sensors out, and that'll be the end of the network unless we find another way to fund it in the interim.
Wow. And it's ask Iowa, what's your economy? Farming. Well, what do you need? Well, soil and water. Well, should you keep an eye on them? Nah. I mean,
no,
it's
sir.
And then you factor in, well, what directly impacts you? What directly impacts your health? Not interested. It is. I mean, if you're an Iowan, you should be offended by that. It's an insult to your health and your intelligence that the powers that be get away with that. It's a big screw you. Get out of the way. Somebody needs to make their money, and that I normally don't get so impassioned politically, but that's exactly what that is. And correlation is not causation, but it is real dang interesting that that our cancer rate is as high as it is. The rate of increase is as high as it is, and our water quality is as poor as it is. And to then say, no, we do not want anyone monitoring that. We will not support that.
Yeah.
Is
get out of our closet.
Right. It's a direct effort to keep people blind, and not saying they want people to be sick, but they really don't care if they are. And that's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's if you find funding, I hope you find it from this podcast. This is all we ask, is that you take Kent and I on a river rafting trip. That's all we want.
Neither one of us is equipped for a 28-foot free fall.
Well, I was trying to figure out, how you guys would be kneeling in the front of the boat, and who would have their arms around you while you were screaming.
Yeah, I would be praying.
I'd be holding on to Kent. I think he's not going to budge.
Well, so having been down, the Snake and the Salmon River, when you get down near the confluence, there was back in the 1960s, when the hydropower and flood control systems were being built in the country, and the three dams of the Snake River complex were built with Brownlee and Hell's Canyon and Oxbow. There was a dam that was proposed for the lower part of the Snake River called the High Mountain Sheep Dam.
Okay.
And again, when I float that river and I think in going through that gorge where that dam didn't get built, and the reason it didn't get built is that as the funding was going through the federal Congress, the outfitters were bringing congressional men and women out there and taking them down the river and giving them float trips and taking them on hunting trips and showing them what a loss that would be for our country. And, and I think for the same thing in Iowa, what a loss it is for the state of Iowa that we don't put our water and natural resources at a higher level. Why is it that we expect that we go to Minnesota and Canada for lake fishing and the 10,000 lakes?
Yeah.
Why is it that we have to go to Colorado and the mountain streams, to recreate on streams? And yet, they say, well, for the intended uses, we should forget about the streams of Iowa.
Do you think
that's not right?
That's because prairie was so easy to rip up compared to some of those trees and stuff like that we were able to do it before anyone looked around and made a difference?
Well, the soil under it was just so you could grow what you wanted to grow.
Yeah, and again, I think it's unfair for us, really, to go back and try to put judgment on what happened 100 years ago. When people were trying to do what they thought was the right thing for them at the time. I think where I get frustrated is that I think we know what some good things that we should be doing now are. And again, I talked about, the conversion of row crop agriculture in the 2-year floodplain, something that we should be moving with much greater pace on. the adoption of these conservation practices should happen. The environmental performance standards, when you sign up for and take federal and state assistance, you should have some more holistic, like the conservation stewardship program that Senator Harkin brought to USDA back when he served Iowa. It's a program that's never been fully funded. We fund CRP, but we don't fund that whole farm program, CSP program, like it could be funded. There are so many different things that we could do, but it takes strength of leadership to do it.
Yeah. And admitting there's a problem.
And admitting there's a problem.
And that's really where it starts. What's a body of water? Let's get off on it. Let's finish on a good note here. What's a body of water you're scared of? Like a famous body of water.
Oh,
because I definitely have 2 on my list.
Okay, well, that I'm scared of. I mean, I'm scared of the power of water. So believe me, when I've gone down the Snake and the Salmon River, I'm not frightened to inability not to do that activity, but I'm very respectful of the river, and I think that's an important piece to remember. Water has power.
I'm scared of the North Sea.
Okay,
and I'm scared of the Congo River.
Why?
Because the North Sea there's sea monsters in there, man. That's where the Vikings were scared of it. The Vikings are scared of something. Everybody should be scared of it. It just seems so angry and cold and dark and deep.
Yeah.
And there's sea monsters in there.
There's for sure sea monsters in there. There might be in our pond.
And the Congo River is so deep. I think
is it really? I didn't know that.
I think it's. And that's an angry river, too. I mean, you look at that, it's so turbulent, and it's like 700 feet deep.
What? Really?
I don't know that to be true, but I'll take Ken's word for it.
Fact check it real quick. I think the deepest
like
parts are
lake.
Yeah. I mean, when I heard that, it was like, you got to be kidding me. And the Amazon, of course, creeps me out. There's a million things in the Amazon that can kill you.
Yeah.
But I think I would rather.
Isn't the Congo where, like, people say they used to see those, like, 60-foot snakes or whatever? Isn't that?
Oh, like the Titanoboa?
Yeah.
It could be.
720 feet.
Wow, that's amazing.
Reaching depths up to.
I mean, what's the greatest depth of Lake Michigan? It's got to be close. I think Superior's over 1,000, isn't it?
Of Lake Michigan, 922. That's crazy.
So it's almost there.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, that just creeps me out.
Wow.
But when you think about it, again, when we look back in time, and things like the creation of the National Park System, creation of the Clean Drinking Water Act, where are those Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats that want to be the conservation leaders of our day? Where are they? And I wish that we could find champions out there. Today, when we hear about what's going on both in our state legislature and our federal legislature, the conservation groups that I'm involved in, it's all about playing defense. It's we stop this bad bill and we stop that bad bill, and yet those bad bills keep coming back each year. When are we going to have?
When are we making new Neil Smith reservations?
Exactly.
Wildlife. I mean. One, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah,
really great message. I know you speak a lot, but you said it very eloquently. My dull brain was able to comprehend what was going on, and I think that's important. And for people listening, there are things you can do to make a difference. If you got $1 million laying around, you can put 500 acres into prairie, but you have no money in your bank account, you can share this episode and help people just understand it's a big deal. We're not trying to rile people up to be emotional. We're trying to show them that it actually is a big deal. And when enough of us realize it's a big deal and enough of us start talking about it, we don't even have to scream about it. We can just talk about it. Things will start to change. The conversation will start to change. Democrats and Republicans, I believe, will be able to see the people who are voting for me say that this is important, so I need to do something about this. And let's not wait till it's too late. Let's not have to move out or get huge federal grants of billions of dollars to deal with cancer in our state, right? Let's actually do something about it now. So share this podcast, or Dr. Weber, where can they find some of this information you're talking about if they want to actually really know what they're talking about, make sure that what they're saying is accurate? Yeah,
so very quickly, you can Google IIHR, Hydroscience and Engineering, or the Iowa Flood Center, and you'll come directly to our information sources there. We have online information sources. The Iowa Flood Information System is best in class. The Iowa Water Quality Information System is seen as best in class for water quality data and sharing. Anybody can go to those resources. And then we have a team of exceptional scientists that can help and answer anybody's questions.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give you guys a little life tip. Go on your phone, go to the notes section. And this is going to take you 30 minutes. And from then on, it's going to take you 3 minutes. Find all of the people that represent you at a local, state, and federal level, and then keep up with that list. Write down their email. And then you just put them all, CC them all in an email when you're passionate about something that affects all of their levels of government, and you just send them that email, and they will start to get the word. So the first time, yes, it will take you 30 minutes to do it. Every time after that, you can write up a little thing, 3 minutes, and guys, every single person that lives in Iowa or a state surrounding Iowa or the Gulf of Mexico, our legislators should have heard from all of us that are passionate. If you're listening for the first time, I really appreciate you being here. But if you're recurring, you call yourself a conservationist, super, super important that your legislators hear from you, because it doesn't happen in the water, in the soil. Conservation happens one mind at a time.